For centuries, there's been this massive contradiction about human behavior and spirituality that has literally baffled seekers. It's a paradox rooted in a classic text called A Cloud of Fog About Nature. We hear it all the time, right? Just be natural or follow your true nature. Sounds great on paper. But what happens when human willfulness, acting on our own natural desires, actually becomes the exact thing preventing us from reaching a higher state of being? Let's dive right into this explainer and see how the author unravels this ultimate spiritual contradiction. To really grasp the scale of this paradox, we've got to look at the traditional baseline of Eastern philosophy. Master Bodhidharma's Bloodstream sermon lays it out explicitly. Nature is Buddha, and Buddha is nature. In traditional thought, the ultimate goal is pretty straightforward. An enlightened heart is one that perfectly perceives nature. Bodhidharma actually goes as far as to say that without this perception of nature, all other teachings of Dharma are basically just demonic talks. So the ground rule here is crystal clear. Perceiving and following nature is absolutely crucial to enlightenment. But here's where we hit a massive wall. Think about it. If the universe is just a stage for nature, and we're supposed to follow our nature, then acting willful, which really just means acting on our own natural impulses, should be the right path. Shouldn't it? Well, reality tells a completely different story. People who are completely willful, the ones who just do whatever they naturally feel like doing in the moment, they don't exactly become immortals or reach Buddhahood. And that's the contradiction. We're told to follow our nature, but if we actually act willfully, we fail. The source material perfectly calls this the fog about nature. So, how do we clear this up? Let's look at section 1. 3 degrees of willfulness, analyzing human behavior. The author essentially takes a magnifying glass to how we act out this willfulness in our daily lives, breaking it down into 3 distinct psychological profiles. First up, we've got the weak-willed profile, exemplified by someone the text calls Zhuoyi. Now, these folks have their own ideas, and they definitely conflict with the Tao, the higher path. They want things their way. But because they still have a deep sense of awe in their hearts, they'll actually yield even when they're unhappy, which keeps them on the path. Next is the medium-willed profile, like Lifechanyuan. Think of that stubborn colleague we all know who only yields if their pride is kept intact. They totally know when they're wrong, but their ego is just so strong that they drift back and forth. If their ego is protected, they'll follow the Tao. If it's bruised, they deviate entirely. And then finally, we have the strong-willed profile, like Tianxin, who are completely desperate to act on their own personal wishes, no matter what. It's this strong-willed archetype where the true danger really lies. These individuals might actually know they're in the wrong, but their emotions completely override their rationality. They are literally unwilling to comply with the Tao, let alone succumb to it. Often, wayward people like this have either been totally spoiled or just haven't faced enough frustration in life to temper those wild impulses. For them, following their nature is just pure, unyielding stubbornness masquerading as spiritual freedom. So if human willfulness is that flawed, what happens if we look outside of humanity? That brings us to section 2, the brutality of nature, a dangerous reality. When the author observes the natural world to see if raw nature holds the key to spiritual purity, they don't find peaceful, serene meditation. They see the exact opposite. They note the chaotic fickleness of flowing water. They look at the brutal fighting and killing among animals. They see the aggressive, stubborn willfulness of thorns, vitex, and vines that just ruthlessly choke out everything else in the forest. And, mirroring all this, they see the constant fighting and robbing in the human world. All of these things, the author argues, are just deductions of raw nature playing out in real time. Raw nature is the absolute strongest driving force, and it is entirely ruthless. Which brings the author to a really stark realization. Simply following one's nature and acting with willfulness are both highly problematic and deeply dangerous. Think about it for a second. Wolves, insects, tigers, leopards, they're all just following their nature. Thorns and vines, acting entirely willfully. If we just blindly let go and act like the raw natural world, we aren't exactly moving closer to enlightenment, are we? We're just acting like wild beasts or choking weeds. Because of this harsh reality, the author makes a seriously bold move in section 3, challenging traditional wisdom, the 6th patriarch. To really get the weight of this challenge, we have to look at what the 6th patriarch, Huning, famously wrote in the Platform Sutra. He stated, "Who would know that our nature is intrinsically pure, intrinsically free from becoming or annihilating?" For generations, this has literally been the gold standard of spiritual thought. It's this beautifully romanticized idea that deep down, your base, original self-nature is perfectly pure, flawless, and completely unchanging. But here is the massive twist. Our source text argues that Huning's famous words are fundamentally flawed. Based on the brutality and the fickleness of the natural world we just looked at, the author declares that self-nature is absolutely not intrinsically pure. It's chaotic, it experiences constant birth and annihilation, and it certainly cannot produce everything in perfect, peaceful harmony. By putting this out there, the author is completely dismantling the romanticized version of nature that spiritual seekers have clung to for centuries. You can't just look inward, find your raw, unfiltered nature, and expect it to be this pristine sanctuary. This leaves us standing at a massive philosophical crossroads. If we're told we must follow our nature, the immediate glaring question becomes, follow what nature? Are you following the nature of a devil or the nature of a Buddha? Are you leaning into the raw, instinctual nature of a beast or the higher nature of humanity? Are you following a collective commonality or just your own selfish personality quirks? The point is, you absolutely cannot just blindly follow whatever instinct bubbles up and label it spiritual. And that realization leads us to the ultimate resolution in Section 4, choosing your true nature, the paradigm shift. To clear the fog, you have to realize that you don't just passively have a nature that you surrender to. Instead, you must actively choose the specific nature of your ultimate goal. The author uses a really vivid analogy here. Let's say you want to be a cat. Well, then you must catch mice when you see them. You have to embody that specific feline nature entirely and abandon mercy. Conversely, if you want to become a higher spiritual being, like an immortal, you must strictly follow immortal nature and abandon mortal grief. You have to actively align your everyday actions with a specific state of being you are trying to achieve, not just run with any random impulse you happen to feel. Fully taking on this new nature requires some extreme discipline. It literally means you have to completely abandon the conflicting instincts of your old nature. As the text lays out, a cat that suddenly shows mercy and compassion to a mouse, well, it's no longer functioning as a cat. Similarly, an immortal who moans, laments, and weeps over mortal things, like human marriages or funerals, is no longer an immortal. Achieving a higher state requires a ruthless, unwavering adherence to that new, chosen nature. And yes, that means entirely letting go of your previous emotional, mortal reflexes. So here is the bottom line, the final thesis that untangles our whole contradiction. Master Bodhidharma was absolutely right that you need to perceive nature to become enlightened. However, the major caveat here is that you absolutely must not follow human nature's obsession with the passing mortal world. To reach heaven or whatever higher state you're aiming for, you have to perceive the overarching nature of the universe, but at the very same time, you must actively reject the chaotic, willful debauchery of your own mortal instincts. You don't just yield to what feels natural right now in the moment. Instead, you discipline yourself to match the exact nature of your ultimate destination. Which leaves us with this final thought. The whole cloud of fog about nature finally lifts when we realize that raw, human willfulness is a trap. It is not a spiritual path. True enlightenment isn't about just letting go of the steering wheel and seeing what happens. It's about deliberately choosing a new road. So as you go through your week, I want you to ask yourself, will you continue to be ruled by the chaotic, reactionary impulses of your mortal nature, or will you consciously choose the nature of what you truly wish to become? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this deep dive has given you a powerful new lens through which to view your own path. Catch you next time.